Okay, think about this for a second. What could possibly make tens of thousands of people just leave everything they've ever known and walk 3,000 miles to go fight a war? Today, we are diving into one of the most incredible and honestly brutal chapters in all of history, the First Crusade. It's a massive story of faith, of power, and a journey that really did change the world forever.
And it all kicked off with two little words, Deus Vult. In Latin, that means God wills it. And this wasn't just some cool catchphrase, it was a command, a promise, and a call to arms that was about to set an entire continent on fire.
So that's the big question here, right? Why? I mean, what could motivate a regular person back in the 11th century to drop their farming tools, say goodbye to their family, and just start walking across a continent to fight and probably die? Well, the answer, it's complicated. To really get our heads around this huge movement, we have to start with one guy and one incredibly powerful speech. The year is 1095. We're in a field in Clermont, France, and the world is literally about to change.
This man right here is Pope Urban II. Now, he'd gotten a message from the Byzantine emperor asking for a little help against the Seljuk Turks, but Urban, he saw a much bigger opportunity here. He gives this amazing speech calling on all Christians to stop fighting each other and instead to march east and take back the Holy Land. The response? It was immediate and it was absolutely massive. And what he was calling for was something brand new, something called a crusade. See, this wasn't just any old war. It was a holy war, kind of like a military pilgrimage, and it had the Pope's official seal of approval. The people who signed up were called Crusaders because they took the cross, and many of them would actually sew a big cloth cross right onto their clothes.
So, where were all these people heading? They were going to the Holy Land. This is the area we now think of as the Middle East, and it's home to the most sacred, most important places for three of the world's biggest religions. But for these Crusaders, the #1 prize, the ultimate goal, was the city of Jerusalem.
But here's the kicker. This was the Pope's ultimate sales pitch. He offered something that no one had ever offered before, a full pardon for all your sins. He basically said, if you die on this holy mission, you get a direct, non-stop ticket to heaven. Now, for people in a deeply religious time who were terrified of what would happen after they died, well, that was an offer that was pretty much impossible to say no to.
Now, the Pope and the Emperor, they were expecting an army of professional, trained knights. But they weren't the first ones to answer the call. Not even close. The first wave was something else entirely. A chaotic, wild, unpredictable mob that we now call the People's Crusade.
Get this, an astonishing 40,000 people, mostly peasants and regular folks with almost no training and terrible equipment, just packed up and started walking toward the Holy Land. Their leader was this really popular preacher named Peter the Hermit. This was definitely not the disciplined army anyone had been hoping for.
And this slide really highlights the two totally different forces we're talking about here. First, you have the People's Crusade, super passionate but a complete mess. And then, coming up behind them, you had the Prince's Crusade, the professional, heavily armed knights that the Pope had actually wanted in the first place. Both were heading for Jerusalem, but man, they could not have been more different.
And before the People's Crusade even got close to the enemy, they carved this path of destruction right through Europe. Tragically, they attacked and massacred Jewish communities in Germany. They stole food and looted their way through Hungary, and they even got into fights with the Byzantine soldiers who were sent to guide them. It was just absolute chaos.
So when this undisciplined group finally reached enemy territory in Anatolia, well, the end was brutal and it was fast. A professional Seljuk Turk army easily tricked them into an ambush at a place called Sivitote. It really wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter.
I mean, just look at these numbers, they're staggering. Of the roughly 40,000 people who set off on this People's Crusade, only about 3,000 survived and managed to get back to safety. It was just a disastrous start to the whole thing.
All right, so with that disaster over, the real army finally showed up. This was the Prince's Crusade, a disciplined, well-equipped force of about 50,000 of Europe's most powerful knights and nobles.
Their journey was long, and it was unbelievably tough, taking more than 2 years. They started out at the great city of Constantinople, they won some major battles at Nicaea and Dorylaeum, they somehow survived a nightmare siege at Antioch, and then finally, they reached the walls of Jerusalem.
Oh man, the siege of Antioch. That nearly destroyed them. For 8 long months, They were the ones being besieged, they were starving, soldiers were deserting, things looked hopeless. They finally got inside the city by bribing a guard, only to find themselves trapped by a huge enemy army. It seemed like it was all over, until a soldier claimed he had a vision and found the Holy Lance, the spear that supposedly pierced Christ's side on the cross. Whether it was a miracle or not, it totally fired up the army. They charged out of the city, and against all odds, they smashed the bigger force.
So after the miracle at Antioch, there was only one objective left. The city that had started this whole crazy journey in the first place, Jerusalem. The final goal was right there, in sight. But just look at what it cost to get there. Of the 50,000 knights who started the Prince's Crusade, only about 12,000 were still alive. They were exhausted, they were starving, they were thirsty, but they had made it. And they say when they saw the city for the first time, a lot of these tough warriors just fell to their knees and cried. But taking the city looked impossible. The defenders had been smart. They'd chopped down all the trees nearby, so there was no wood to build siege towers. And then, a stroke of incredible luck, some Christian ships showed up at a port nearby. The Crusaders immediately took them apart, used the wood to build 2 giant siege towers, and launched their final attack. On July 15, 1099, the Crusaders broke through. Jerusalem was captured. But what followed the victory was just horrific. For 3 straight days, the army went on a rampage, slaughtering an estimated 40,000 men, women, and children, both Muslim and Jewish, who lived in the city.
So, after that brutal conquest, the Crusaders didn't just pack up and go home. Nope, they stayed. Their new goal was to hold on to the land they had just won. And to do that, they created something completely new in the world.
They called this new territory Outre-mer, which is just French for beyond the sea. These were basically brand new Christian kingdoms, set up thousands of miles from Europe, right in the middle of the Muslim world.
And they established 4 of these Crusader states. You have the County of Edessa, the Principality of Antioch, the County of Tripoli, and the most important one, the Kingdom of Jerusalem. These little European-style kingdoms carved right out of the Middle East would actually last for nearly 200 years and would be a constant source of conflict, a lasting legacy of this first bloody crusade.
So in the end, the First Crusade succeeded against all possible odds. It actually accomplished its goal of capturing Jerusalem, but it also kicked off centuries of war between Christians and Muslims, and it changed the relationship between these 2 worlds forever, which kind of leaves us with a really tough question to think about. What is the true price of faith?